Welcome to the Indie Fantasy Club. Today we're talking with Delilah Waan. And just as a quick introduction, which is quite difficult to do with all of the credentials that she has, but she's written 3 bilingual children's picture books. She's had some postgraduate accounting textbooks under her belt, a musical, and 2 epic fantasy books in her Resonance Crystal Legacy series. So the first book in that series, Petition, was a semi-finalist for the SPFBO9 Awards, was the winner of the Indie Ink Awards, and was the winner of the Indie Fantasy Fund. So we're very lucky and privileged to be speaking with her today. So Delilah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a big honor for me to be here.
I want to dive right in and just get to know you on a personal level a little bit more. So you were born in Hong Kong, you lived in New York for a little while, and you've traveled abroad, and now you live in Australia. So you've kind of been around the globe a little bit. So with all the places that you've been, I'm curious, what does an ideal vacation look like to you?
Oh my goodness. So when I was probably in like my 20s or something, I would have said my ideal vacation is like nonstop globe trotting, going around to like all the Michelin starred restaurants in the world and just being able to like constantly eat and like go to theaters and shows. But now I'm in my late 30s and I'm just like, you know what? A really good vacation just sounds like being home in like a very chill place where I don't have to deal with errands or anything, and I can just chill out and like get through my TBR. And if I don't feel like doing anything, I can just sit there, lie on the beach, and just stare at nothing and think of nothing.
I feel like there's 2 types of like travelers, and you nailed them with what you just said, because you have the people who like to have an agenda and they like to sightsee and they have like a whole list of things that they want to hit. And then you have like the relaxers, like the people who just want to sit on the beach and like chill and not have to stress about things. So it's funny that you say that, because I've always been a little bit more of a, I guess you could say a relaxer, but my wife is more of a she likes the destination traveling a little bit more and seeing the cool sights and all that stuff. So
My, shall I say, vacation style comes from like my parents. So when I was a kid, we'd get in a car and we would just like drive. And this was like pre-internet days, right? So like the way that you route planned was you had a map which had like all the, various towns and things like that in Australia. And then they would just go, oh, okay, we're going to do Sydney to Melbourne. We're going to do like maybe the Great Ocean Road, go see the 12 Apostles, which are like these big rock stack formations down there. And it's very scenic and very cool. But like you couldn't book any of your accommodation. You didn't know what local attractions would be there until you actually got there. And so like all my life, I grew up with this vacation style, I guess, of just like taking it very much like one stop at a time. Fast forward 20 something years, and like we were planning this big trip to, I think we did Cairns to go to the Great Barrier Reef, just like for an overnight snorkel trip out on the reef. And then we did Japan for like a week and a bit, and then we did New York, and then I stayed in New York and he flew back home to Australia. And like the whole time I think he was so stressed because like I booked all the flights, because the flights were the important thing, and then I think I booked like the first night of hotels. And then I would just be like, yeah, let's just get there. Let's just see what's around. Let's see where we feel like going. And then like, we'll book the stuff for the next day. And I swear, I think he was just like so stressed the whole time, because he was like, where are we going to sleep tomorrow? And I'm like, I don't know, like something will pop up. But like, I think when we did South America, I think before we were like, okay, it's time to start a family. So we did South America. And the one thing I wanted to do was to climb Sugarloaf Mountain. And it's like this ginormous monolith rock formation that sits kind of in the middle of the harbor. And he was just like, we were like halfway up, I think, Sugarloaf, and he was just like very discombobulated because there's no like official tour trail or anything there. So there's heaps of tour guides who will take you up the mountain, and they'll have like all the safety harnesses and the rock climbing gear and stuff like that. But it's very much like a sheer rock face, very high up from the ocean. And we're just like sitting on the side of this rock, and he's like, what are you making me do? But like, it was 100% worth it, because we got up to the top and like the views were just magnificent.
Yeah, I don't think there's any view magnificent enough to force me to go that high on a sheer cliff face. Way too much of a fear of heights to survive something like that. And we have plenty of stuff like that here where I'm from. Like we have Angel's Landing, which is notorious for being steep and a treacherous climb and all that stuff. But no, that's I like backpacking, but I do not like the sense of danger in the activity. So I'm not as much of a thrill seeker with that.
Utah's got some really beautiful landscapes though. I've been there one time. And where did I go to? What is a really popular national park you guys have there?
We've got Zion's, we've got Moab.
Zion. Yeah, we went to Zion. Yeah, it was so beautiful. I'd love to go back and like be able to do some longer hikes and like maybe camp there and stuff. Like I can just imagine how stunning it would be to sleep under the stars there and like check out the sunrise, the sunset there. It'd be amazing. One thing that really struck me like traveling around both the US and China is just like the land. It's really big. It's really hard to describe just how big everything is. And it's like it's a bit odd for me because being born in Hong Kong, like Hong Kong is tiny, right? But the concentration of people living in that spot is it's really hard to describe. Like you would walk out onto the streets, and if you're not like elbowing your way through the crowd to get to where you're going, like it's a bit like what's wrong? Like why is there no one here? Why do I have room around me on the street? Like this is like personal space is not really a thing. Maybe that's changed like, you know, post COVID, but like really like as a kid, like just, you know, walking down like the streets of Kowloon, it'd just be like, yeah, it's crowded. Like you have to hold on tight to each other to not get lost. Like you're packing onto the buses, onto the MTR, like sardines in a can. But then like when they opened the high-speed rail from Hong Kong to China, we took that up there, and I remember getting off, like it was at the station terminal in Shanghai, and it was just massive. Like I got off this train, I'm like, there's just open space as far as the eye can see. And like mentally I knew from looking at the map, I'm like, this is like not a big area of the city. Like I know mentally this station is just like this tiny portion of the city, and yet I was standing there, I'm just like, there's so much space, it's incredible. And I had that same feeling like traveling through a lot of like America, like kind of outside you know, New York City and LA, like the kind of big East Coast, West Coast cities. Like everything is just, it's really, really big. Like the distances are just vast.
As I mentioned earlier, you have published a few bilingual children's picture books before you ended up writing Petition. And so with your name being associated with those books, how did you come up with Delilah Waan as your pen name?
It's hilarious. So I knew from all of the advice that, you know, people tell you when you start first researching, like, you know, how do I self-publish and stuff. I knew that because the audiences for those books were so different that I definitely needed to separate it out into a separate pen name. In hindsight, would I recommend anybody just starting out spinning up a new pen? No, I would not. It seems like such a small thing, but you're effectively doubling your overhead because it's twice the number of author websites, social media accounts, news, like everything, right? Because you've got, it's two separate audiences. And I'm not saying they don't overlap. Like certainly I have a very small portion of like readers who are like me. They have grown up overseas, they've emigrated, they have children, they want their children to be able to speak Cantonese, so they do buy my kids' books. And at the same time, they're also fantasy readers, so they like to read a fantasy that's got a lot of immigrant and diaspora themes, so they will also buy my fantasy novels. But we're talking like, I don't know, it's probably less than a 1% overlap in audience. And so you're effectively like running one pen name, I think, is already hard enough. Like, publishing is hard, period, no matter whether you go trad or self-pub. But like the amount of overhead that you've got to do for yourself in self-pub, because you're the author, you're also the publisher, it's a lot. And then you add another pen name and you effectively double it. And there are many successful authors who do have multiple pen names, but usually they kind of like add on slowly over time. But I was just I was in this weird headspace because I had written Petition, like, for me. It was something that I'd always wanted to do, like having a written novel. And I just kind of thought, well, if I'm going to write something, I would like to publish it. And I would like to, have it find an audience, no matter how small that audience is. And so I did it. And then I didn't really think about all of the overhead that came with it. And that included thinking of like what the pen name would be. So I finished the draft, and then I went, guys, I finished the draft to my writing group. Let's go on Demonza's website and see. And this is back when Demonza was doing pre-made covers. So they had this one page on their website where they had all of the pre-made covers they had. And Demonza's like one of the top firms in terms of like indie cover design firms out there. And a normal cover from Demonza it's expensive. I think their packages for a basic cover start at $395. And then if you kind of go beyond that and you want to do like paperbacks and things like that, there's extra fees to do all of that stuff. I was very much on a budget, and I was very lucky. I found a pre-made. It fit really well. And I picked it and I was like, okay, this pre-made works for me, but can you just change the character from like dual wielding daggers to like a spear? And then can you just change the city in the background from like, they had like this mountain city. And I was like, can you just change that to like a port city? Like maybe put some ships and stuff in there. And that was literally the extent of the brief I gave them. And so when I went to fill in their order form, they were like, what pen name is this being published under? And I was like, oh God, I did not think about that. So cue about, and this was during when they were running one of their sales as well. So they were like, oh, you can buy the pre-made, which is already heavily discounted from their normal package. And you can also get it for like 20% off during like this time limited Christmas sale. And I had like left it up to the last minute because I was like, no, you're not allowed to buy the cover until you finish the draft. So I finished the draft, and I think I had like a couple of hours left. And so I was in my writing groups just like going, oh God, guys, like I didn't think of a pen name, like help, like what am I doing? And we just went with Delilah because I'd moved to New York City like 3 times in my life. And because of that, like for a while, my friends actually called me Delilah because of the Plain White Tea song, hey there, Delilah.
Okay.
So that's where the Delilah comes from. And then I needed like a last name, and like I actually ummed and ahed for a while over whether I was going to do initials or whether I was going to do an obviously feminine pen name or whether I was going to do like a gender neutral pen name. And this is probably something that like most authors won't have to consider unless you're a female author publishing epic fantasy that is not romantasy specifically. And I kind of went, okay, well, Fonda Lee uses Fonda, Jani Wirtz uses Jani. They're both awesome authors, and like it's very cool. And I think we should normalize the fact that authors with feminine pen names can write epic fantasy that is not romantasy. And so I went, yeah, I'm gonna go with Delilah. And then Waan, I think we just picked from like the Cantonese dictionary because like it was the Cantonese word that meant imaginary. So it's literally fantasy in Cantonese.
Oh,
and then like
so
I think
cool.
2 days after I finalized the pen name and like I paid my cover design fee and all that stuff, like I see a tweet from Jani Wirtz, and it was in reply to, I think it was Tory Talks. Tory Talks had posted a thread on Twitter, and she was asking for she was asking authors what would you advise yourself if you could kind of go back in time and give aspiring author you some career advice. And I'm not kidding when I say Jenny Wirtz replied, and she was like, I would tell myself to go with a gender neutral pen name or initials, hands down. She's like, this,
really?
Yes, it's incredible. She was like, I cannot tell you how many problems having an obviously feminine pen name has caused me in being a female author who writes epic fantasy that is not romantasy or YA. It's it's a thing.
That's interesting because I made a TikTok the other day about this very topic, which is why I was curious how you came to your name, because so many authors that submit to me and that I interact with, fantasy authors specifically, do the double initials. So the ML or the TL or they do the two initials and then the last name. And so I asked them, why does everyone do this? Because I like the named authors. For me, the initial names is okay, but I feel like it has less personality and less I don't know. I don't look at it a ton, but it is something that I have thought about the more that I've seen it, especially starting this channel, where I'm like, man, I kind of like seeing people's names. And even if it's a pen name, I had someone submit to me and the name that they chose was so fun. I'm like, we're fantasy authors. We should be able to have fun pen names. And so when you're just describing yours and saying oh yeah, it means fantasy, that is what I look. Those are the tidbits that I look for with these names, because it's just so fun to see that. The person who submitted, I think the last name that he chose was Great Witch, which yes. I'm like, that's great. That has a fantasy ring to it.
Will and I actually beta read each other's books, so I love his book, by the way. So guys, if you're watching this and you're into the Black Company and you want something that's got a very mythic but a standalone, and it's literary fantasy kind of vibes, if you like The Spear Cuts Through Water, go get The House of the Rain King. It is the best standalone I've read since The Spear Cuts Through Water. I love it to bits. You will not regret it, I promise you.
Wow, what are the chances of that? That's exactly the book I was thinking of. So, and the author that I was thinking of. So, but yeah, love that name. And I love when fantasy authors turn their names into they lean into the fantasy. So I actually like that you chose Delilah Waan. So I'm just going to throw that out there, despite, the challenges that come with it. I personally am a big fan.
Oh, thank you.
Getting into a little bit of your past and where you've come from and how you've come on this journey, you have to be a pretty serious numbers person to become a chartered accountant. So what made you pursue that career originally, and what caused some of the corporate burnout from that experience?
Oh God. So if you know anybody who's had an Asian upbringing, then you probably know that there are only a few acceptable career paths if you're a kid who's growing up Asian, and those paths are doctor, lawyer, or accountant / teacher. There's a few tertiary tier occupations, so accountant, teacher, engineer, they all kind of sit in that third tier, but Asian parents, they want doctors or they want lawyers. I did not like biology in high school, and the thought of having to study medicine just makes me go, oh, I don't want to. Law has no interest for me whatsoever, and so I kind of went, oh, I don't know. And then during high school, there was an info night or something, and the big four accounting firms, they were all doing at the time something that was called a cadetship program. So it was this kind of thing where they go, okay, we know you haven't actually gone to uni and gotten your uni degree yet, but it's competitive trying to get talent. And so we're going to it's effectively an apprenticeship model, right? So they're okay. We will kind of give you some support as you go through uni, and you'll do like concurrent work study. So that was like, oh, okay. And like accountancy had never actually been on my radar. I was like trying to convince my parents to let me go to Juilliard to study piano performance instead, but like yeah, they were not into that for job security reasons. And so they kind of were like, oh, like this sounds cool, like why don't you just go along and see, like, and send in your transcripts and stuff. And like somehow or other I made it through the interviews and got an offer, yada yada yada. And so yeah, I ended up doing accounting, not out of any special passion for it, but just because it seemed like the most logical thing to do at the time. And I specifically went into external audit, which is it's not what you normally think of when you think accounting, right? Like, so if you think accounting, you might be thinking of like, the depiction of it in, the producers, where like they're all wearing their visors, they've got the calculators, and it's like this very boring job. So with external audit, essentially what you do is, like, when companies publish their financial reports, like the publicly traded ones, you usually have an auditor go through those financial statements and just give an opinion on whether or not those financial statements are true and fair or fairly presented with whatever accounting framework they're using. And basically that kind of provides a level of assurance for anybody who's wanting to invest in those companies, etc. The work environment's it's a very intense, like high stakes, very high pressure kind of environment. And because the service you're providing is not really valued by the people who you're interacting with every day, like it kind of gets down on you. So there was a point in time where, like, especially in the New York office, like it's busy season, it's audit busy season, it's reporting season. Everybody is going to work a minimum 55-hour week. Things were so bad resource wise that like you never had downtime. It was, in theory, not reporting season, but they didn't have enough people to do all the work. So you were just constantly on. So after a while I was like, nope, I've had enough of that. And I left to save my sanity. I got, let's see, because I bounced around between New York and Sydney. So I came back to Sydney. Things are kind of simultaneously better, but also worse here. It's better in the sense that the reporting deadlines aren't as intense as in the US, because in the US, really only the publicly traded companies have to get audits. Whereas here in Australia, like it's a government requirement. Like, so over a certain size of company, you have to get what's called a statutory audit. But that meant like I was spending like 90% of my time working on reports that just got filed in a drawer somewhere and nobody even read. And I was like, what am I even doing with my life? Like in theory, you kind of know that you are supporting the stability of the financial markets and therefore society, but I just really didn't feel like I was making a meaningful impact anywhere. I can't see how this is going to work. Like even if I did not sleep, did not do anything else but work, I can't see how I'm going to make these things happen. And my husband came home from work, and like I think he found me sitting on the floor of our apartment, just like in tears, because I was like, honey, like I can't make this work. I can't, like the math is not mathing. Like, I don't see how I can make this happen. And he's just like, okay, like, what do you want to do? And I think basically a week later, I was like, yeah, I've done so many busy seasons. Like, when am I going to ever be able to write for orchestra again? And the answer was like, never. So I think a week later, I handed in my resignation. And then we flew up to New York, like did the orchestra concert. It was all awesome, came back. And I was just kind of like going, oh, like, not really sure what I want to do next. Like, I've been very, very blessed. I know, like, in this current economy, a lot of people are having a very hard time finding work, keeping work, and all of that stuff. And I've just been incredibly blessed my whole life to have been able to have a very smooth progression, I would say, career-wise. Like, I have spent so much of my life basically killing myself to do these things and not getting to do any of the projects that I would like to do in my off time. Like I didn't have off time. There was no such thing as off time. So yeah, after that I was just like, no, I need to take some time for myself so that I can do projects that I would like to do for myself, before I, end up at 65 and going, wow, what have I done with my life? I've done like nothing for myself. Yeah.
And on that note, you mentioned that your first kind of creative endeavor was that co-writing of a Broadway musical, which ultimately I think ended up getting delayed. But what did you learn from that experience, and how did it prepare you to kind of write a fantasy novel?
Storytelling, no matter the genre or medium or whatever, like good storytelling principles and skills, like they're the same. And because with a lot of, like, even with marketing promotion, or like just, if you're still in corporate, in that corporate world, and you're trying to develop a good, like, professional reputation and things like that, like, storytelling is basically ubiquitous across everything. And so that was one thing that really surprised me, because probably all my life, like as an Asian kid, like who was not encouraged to do the arts for, a serious career purpose, you're always like, you always kind of get this viewpoint that, the arts are like this kind of very separate, almost frivolous, almost like self-indulgent thing. Like, it's not practical, it's not useful, it's not income generating, like all those things. But really, like, no matter which field I've gone into, like, there's storytelling everywhere. It's just, you might not recognize it as such because you're not, it's not storytelling for the sake of entertainment in the sense that you might be used to, like browsing on Netflix or whatever. Going into like writing Petition, I was very conscious of trying not to do a book that was more ambitious than what I was capable of pulling off, because I wanted to write something that I could get it done in a finite and not too long time frame. And I wanted to be able to tell a story that was, it's got some substance to it. It's not literature, right? Like, it's still genre fiction, but it's genre fiction with some substance. It's trying to say something, and it is something that people can enjoy.
I think a lot of authors just have an idea and they're like, oh, this would be a cool concept. And then they start writing, and then they kind of, like with you in the musical, kind of get overwhelmed, and then they get stuck, and then they're like, I don't even know what to do with this. I don't know enough to know what to do.
Yeah. And I mean, that overwhelm is very real. Like this is my current stack of index cards for book 3 at the moment. Like, this is kind of out of control at the moment. And I, like, there will never be anybody who overthinks your story as much as you do, if that makes sense. But like, the less moving parts there are to the story, the less likely it is that you will overthink it. There's less to go wrong, because more components means basically more complexity. And when you're just starting out, there's so much to think about, and there's so much to work on in terms of developing your skills, that it really helps a lot if you can make it as straightforward as possible. And straightforward doesn't, like, lack of complexity does not equal like a bad book, right? Like, I would argue a simple premise is harder to execute well on than a complicated one, because with a complicated one you can kind of, I don't know, do sleight of hand, and people maybe will give you a pass because they'll be like, oh, the world building is so unique and in-depth and complicated. But when you have simplicity, and it's very easy for a reader to understand what you're going for, then there's almost more focus on what you're doing.
And that's something that I liked about Petition, was it has a similar approach to, I think, other books like something like Red Rising, where even though the world building is very complex and there's a lot that goes into it, we're just focusing on one little sliver of that world for book 1. And I felt that was kind of the case with Petition, where I could tell that the world was vast and that it had a structure and that there was a lot to it. But we just focused on this one little slice of life within this world, which, like you said, I think can be complex, because you then have to make sure that story that you're telling of this piece of someone's life is interesting and engaging enough for the readers, which you did a great job of, by the way.
Thank you.
So you don't have to worry about that. But I agree that with epic fantasies, like you can get lost a little bit with certain characters or plot lines, and readers are a little bit more forgiving of that because of the scope.
I will say that like both Petition and Supplicant they have a very tight focus on the POV characters that you get in the book. So they both go very deep into those POVs, and if that POV does not know something or is not aware of something, like you will not get it from reading their chapters. You basically there are hints of the other stuff going on, but it's not elaborated upon because the POV character has no idea and is not interested in it. And so the biggest challenge I've been finding as I get into writing book 3, it's like book 3 is like book 1, you could say, is mainly sword and sorcery with epic fantasy elements in the background. Book 2 is epic fantasy because of where the stakes are, but it's intimate character driven epic fantasy, if that makes sense. So it's like you've got the characters, they're given a mission, they have to execute the mission, but that mission is just one thing that is happening in the wider world, and the POV characters that you have don't really have a full-on and comprehensive understanding of all the events happening in the wider world. Whereas commonly in like, you know, these big, massive, like epic fantasy sagas, you typically get a lot of chapters where they might be POV chapters, they might be third omniscient chapters, but they kind of follow the movers and shakers in that world. So you as a reader generally have a very good understanding of like, this faction is trying to do this faction is opposing them and they're trying to counter it with this. And so you kind of get that epic narrative because you've got that spread of POVs and perspectives. And the struggle for me has been, well, I've always written it with a very tight character focus, and trying to transition from that to the epic kind of style that more readers are used to. It's like, I don't know whether I should make that flip. Maybe I shouldn't make that flip. Is like, should I add more POVs?
I think it makes you unique in your approach. And I think that's a good thing. I think when you can stand out and do something a little bit different, that's never a bad thing. And I like the style that you're talking about, because I think one of the problems with modern fantasy that I've noticed as I've been reading, not just like indie books, but like traditionally published books, is just the lack of trust in the readers that we get, where just so much is explained through the, not even just the exposition, but like they really want to make sure you know everything about the world. But it's almost refreshing when you get a book that doesn't necessarily hold your hand, that just drops you right in and is like, you are now part of this world. You have to sink or swim. And that's just how it is. Like, I like that aspect of fantasy because that's the immersion aspect that I get from reading a book. It's like, okay, I am on this journey with this character. And like you said, if they don't know something or are not interested, neither am I guess.
The part of it is like the style of storytelling and how the prose is actually constructed, the level of exposition that you do. So if we put kind of your epic fantasy greats on a spectrum, and you have like Brandon Sanderson to Stephen Erickson, right? I'm probably more towards the Stephen Erickson side of things. Like, there's not a lot of overt exposition that I give. Most of it is via context and stuff like that. And it can be really hard trying to figure out like the right audience that book is going to work for. And the challenge, I think, as an indie author is like your reach is going to be more limited than a traditionally published author's reach is going to be.
Yeah.
I think there is still a sizable portion of fantasy or well, any genre really, readers who will see that you're self-published and they'll just go, no, like,
yeah,
I'm not even willing to dip my toes into that pool. I'm not gonna even give you the benefit of reading your blurb or reading your first chapters. I'm just not willing to make that jump yet. And so for the portion of readers who you can attract, the further you go towards the Stephen Erickson side of that spectrum, I would say the smaller your potential readership is going to be, just because the reading curve, I will say, is less easily accessible compared to if you're writing in a style that's closer to Brandon Sanderson, for example. And so Brandon Sanderson and Will White, who are both massively successful, and I would say Brian Cahill as well, like they've all made very deliberate choices in their prose style, the narrative style, their storytelling styles, to make sure that their work is accessible to as large or an audience as possible. And I think that's a big contributing factor to how successful they are.
I would completely agree with that. It's definitely a marketing choice, but I think, again, it's about finding your audience, and I think you'll have more. You can go kind of broad, but I think when you go narrow, like with what you're talking about, like if you think about the people who are fans of Malazan, the Malazan series, those are loyal followers of that series. Like they will, die for the Malazan books and to promote it. And so I do think there are pros and cons to both, but those are good points for people to consider. And with your book, your magic system is very complex, and it also makes sense why it's so complicated, considering you got your inspiration while studying the blockchain. If you could bring one resonance discipline into our world, which one would you pick?
In our current society, where the media is so dominating with like alternative facts, I think you would want to have seeking or evocation, because if somebody gets fact checked, I think you would want to be able to use magic to be like, no, like, I'm sorry, I'm not being biased when I fact checked you. Like, this is just plain untrue. And then I think you would want to follow that up with, this is what actually happened. And it is like an incontrovertible fact. You cannot, dance your way around that. This is the facts. We have to deal with it.
It's funny. I was thinking about like, what would be the two that I would pick? And I literally said the exact same two. I'm like, seeking would be great, because then you can determine the truth. And I was thinking more personal, like on the grander scheme of politics, it would be obviously very useful. But for even like me, like I just recently had to replace my AC unit, and we had to get we got like 5 or 6 different companies to come out. Each of them told us a different thing was wrong with it. And I'm like, this would be a useful magic to be like, what is wrong with this thing? How much does it cost to fix it? Versus like, you don't know if they're just trying to make a bigger commission, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like, you know what? This would be a handy magic to have in our society.
100%. It's like, honestly, the thing I regret about my choice of area of study in university is I regret I did not go into a more technical discipline, right? Because I feel like when you're at that age and you can pick like any of these disciplines that you want to study, like pick something technical, because the soft skills, like figuring out how numbers work to the extent that you need them to run a business, like that's all of that stuff you can pick up and learn later, like when you're doing your own thing. Like it's the level of knowledge that you need in those fields to be effective at what you do is not at a graduate level, let's say, right? Like you do not need to graduate from university as an accountant to be able to account for stuff in your business and like not make a loss, right? Like a basic bookkeeping course will teach you all of those things. But I feel like in that time period of your life when you have no other obligations to other people in your life, and you can just kind of really focus and get that kind of domain expertise, like pick something hard and technical and interesting. Like I think at one point I was like, I would love to study nanotechnology, and then I think I got talked out of it because they were like, that's such a narrow field of application, like, why would you study nanotechnology? And putting aside the fact that I did have a friend who studied nanotechnology and then changed out of it to study computer science, like it's stuff where I go, like, now I would love to be able to write hard sci-fi. I think hard sci-fi is where, we get very interesting explorations of the technologies that we are developing or that we are going to be developing, and asking all of the hard ethical and moral questions and considering those in fiction. before, you know, we have to deal with them in real life. Like, I would love to be able to write hard sci-fi, but I do not have the level of scientific knowledge that I would need to, you know, do any of that convincingly. And the amount of research I would have to do to make any hard sci-fi I write convincing to anybody with just even a high school knowledge of science, like it's going to be the kind of thing where it's like, I would love to write that as an author, but I'm not the author to write it because I just don't have the subject matter expertise to do it. Same with like, I don't know, like coding. Like I know a lot of people will just be like, oh, you could totally just vibe code your way to an app these days. But like, it is so much easier to get something to happen if you have the technical skills to do it yourself. And even if you don't end up being the one to do it yourself because you've, you know, got other stuff on, it helps a lot to have those skills so that you can, you know, speak the language with the people that you hire or the people that you collaborate with to do those things. So yeah, that's kind of my one regret, if you'd like to call it, in respect of what I studied for uni.
So we're not going to get any Andy Weir style books from you in the future then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
Obviously, whatever you can pull from your life experience into your books is very helpful. Like, I think Brandon Sanderson was a biology person before he ended up becoming an author. But I think that's good advice. Like, find something that you're passionate about, and even if it is a little more niche, and then you can kind of adapt and kind of grow from there for your life. And kind of speaking of adapting, you have mentioned that you do plan out your series, but you still leave room for discovery writing with your characters, kind of, again, with the Brandon Sanderson structure. So I know that Lorne wasn't originally part of the plan for your story, but have there been any other characters that have frustrated your plans during your writing process as you've written Supplicant and now moving into book 3?
All the time. People keep asking me for like more Alarum. Can't even remember how I canonized that pronunciation. But like, Alarum is a lot of fun to write, and her whole character again grew out of like one sentence in Petition, and it's like the point where like they're in the massive free for all, and she's just like, why are you guys all mad? Like, we're not doing anything against the rules. And so her whole character came out of that one line, and she's a lot of fun to write because she has a less serious way of looking at the world compared to the other characters. And so like in my stories, which can tend towards like the more serious in tone, like she's just fun to be with. But it does mean that, like, I think it was in the alpha draft of Supplicant, I was very stuck towards the end. The ending was a massive pain in the backside to write, and I just didn't know what to do. So I was just like, Alara's in the scene, so I'll just write a random POV chapter from her. And it was like a really fun POV chapter, but it was one of those chapters where, like, when I sat back and looked at alpha revisions, I'm like, this chapter does not belong there. This chapter doesn't do anything. It's fun, but it doesn't do anything other than convey blocking information about where everybody is standing. And that's kind of it. And it's 2,000 words in the climax. So I had to axe that.
It's funny to hear that, because I think that's an important aspect of writing, where you let your characters make decisions. Sometimes you have to explore characters to get to know their personalities a little bit better. Like you said, you have a lot of fun writing it, but then when you're in the editing process, that's when you can decide kind of whether or not it needs to be in the story. So I think that's a great point. So, and then as a semi-finalist of the SPFBO Awards, I think SPFBO9, could you walk us through your experience with entering that award and like the application and selection process?
So funny story. I published Petition 30th of May 2022. So I actually was eligible for SPFBO 8. And There was like a timing issue because the entries I think open sometime in early May, and I think they close sort of like midway through May, just to allow the organizing teams and stuff like that time to go through the entries and get sorted into the different blog teams and things like that. So it closed on I think the 15th or the 20th, something like that. I missed it by a couple of days, and it was the kind of thing where I was sitting there debating with myself going, I am just in the final stages of proofing. The story's done. Like, should I fill out the application? And then just like, if I don't make it, then whoops, sorry guys, I didn't make it. You can just disqualify me. I'll try again next year. Or whether I should just wait until the book was published. And so I decided to wait. And so I just missed out, even though it would have been eligible. So then for 9, I was just like, no, I'm definitely like, I don't care what happens. I'm definitely going to get my book in this year because I have no clue how else to market it and how else to find an audience. And I knew it was getting bigger and bigger each year because if you go look at kind of the upvotes on Our Fantasy and just kind of generally the social media posting trends and things like that, you could see the contest was like gaining a lot of momentum. And Mark Lawrence had actually posted some graphs on like how long it took for them to hit the 300 cutoff for submissions. So like for 9, I was like, and because it closed at, I don't know, 1 p.m. like British Standard Time or something. It was like late at night for me. So I was like there. I had everything drafted in a document on the side and I had all my files prepped and ready to go. And I was like mashing F5 for the link to open. And like I submitted maybe 4 minutes past. And I think I was already like number, I don't know, 60, whatever. Like Mark was live tweeting how many entries were coming in. And like it was so stressful. It was so stressful because I was so paranoid I would miss it. Obviously I didn't because I was, fortunate enough that I could get my schedule around it to make it. But like, yeah, entries that you closed in 41 minutes. 41 minutes.
That's
like it was
crazy.
wild. It was going so fast that originally my plan was like, SPFBO9, I think, I don't know, it took 6 hours or whatever. It took a number of hours and I was like, it's 11:30 p.m. I'm not going to stay up to see who got in and who didn't. So, but then like when I saw Mark was live tweeting, like we've got 50 entries, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just stay up and chill out with other people and just see when it's closes. And it was like 41 minutes. I think my husband got home. I'm like, honey, like I nearly missed it. It closed so quickly. So getting in was very stressful. And I think it really disadvantaged the people who were in different time zones or who didn't have life circumstances that would allow them to be like me and sit at my computer with a good internet connection and mash F5 until it got through. Like the only reason I even submitted at 4 minutes past was I was so paranoid I made a mistake in my application that I triple checked it like 3 times just to make sure I'd filled out all the boxes and everything. So from SPFBO-X, which was the year after me, and I think going forward, they moved to a lottery system, which I think takes a lot of that pressure off for submissions. And so, yeah, that was like the entry process for me. And I think my biggest learning from that experience is that like so much of how you do in the competition, it's luck. It's all luck. Like obviously to do well in the contest, there is a minimum bar for quality, right? Like if you have not done all the things that you should in order to publish your book professionally, your book is not going to get far in the contest. Like Stephen William Hanna, who is another indie author who was in my cohort for Before We Go blog that year. He is known on Twitter for like his first chapter cull threads. So basically he sits down and he reads like the sample chapters, like the first chapter, if there's a prologue, the prologue and the first chapter of these books. And the ones he likes, he TBRs them. The ones he doesn't, he gently but lovingly roasts them in public in an anonymous fashion. And like, he kind of got a movement going with SPFBO9, which was like, it was so great because we had like, I want to say like there were like 8 to 10 people all doing these first chapter reads for all 300 SPFBO9 titles, it was amazing. And like so many of them like wouldn't have picked up Petition based on title and blurb and genre and whatever else. But because they were doing these first chapter challenges. They were like, yeah, no, I'll give it a shot. They read it and they were like, huh, vibing with this more than I thought I would. And they ended up TBRing it. And then like because they were following in Stephen's footsteps, they would post about it. And so I got so many more eyes on my book than I would have otherwise if it had not been for this community effort of just really just trying to judge the writing on the writing, right? As opposed to trying to judge the writing based on like the blurb or the tropes or the cover, because like all of those things are, I would say they're not things that authors start out being skilled at, like because they're all very marketing related things, which are very different skill set from writing, you know, long form prose. But when you get to the point where you're just literally it's you and the first chapter, and whether you vibe with it as a reader, like it's a whole different ballgame. And so that was like just such a massive boost for me and everybody in the contest that year, because I feel like so many more indie authors got their book in front of people's eyes that they wouldn't otherwise have. And kind of from there, like, you know, it all, like all the blogs have their own different criteria, all the blogs have their own different preferences, and it really is very much luck of the draw. So you can't, like, even if you get in, like, you cannot bank on a certain result or whatever. Like you can absolutely have high hopes for how well your book will do in the competition, but it is a competition. And like not placing, not being a semi-finalist, not getting a badge, like it doesn't mean anything. Like Ryan Cahill got cut in the first round in his year, and look at him now. He was just on a panel with George R.R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Robin Hobb, like at Worldcon, you know, and that was his book came out like when did it come out? I think it was 4 years ago. He was in SPFBO9, right? Like so he's like case in point of how a contest can be really valuable for getting your book in front of people, but it's definitely not the be all and end all.
Yeah, that's what I've kind of noticed with this competition and being exposed to your book, which I wasn't aware at the time that you were part of the awards, but it just shows that the level of talent, and like you said, there is luck that plays into it, because if I was a reviewer, my preferences would lean towards epic fantasy. So if I got like a cozy fantasy or, you know, a romantasy, something like that, I would be less likely, regardless of how well it's written, to advance it, because again, my preferences is more for a different subgenre. So I agree that luck plays a big part of it, but it also, I think you raise a good point in the fact that it just exposed me to how much talent is out there for indie publishing, because I was like, okay, how did Delilah Waan not win with this story? Was like all I could think about as I was reading. And so I think Murder at Spindle Manor was the one that won during your year. So I am planning to read that. And I am going in with an open mind, but that type of story is not typically my preference. So we'll see how it ends up ranking on my scale. But yeah, it just goes to show that even semi-finalists and then finalists and winners, like everyone in that even gets to that point is super talented. And if, like you said, if you don't even get to that point, it could just be a matter of the luck of who your reviewer is and how you were able to get into that position.
My pick for SPFBO9, I thought Sienna Frost, who now publishes under, I'm going to get her name wrong, Delilah Waan, I thought Obsidian Awakening was going to be like a shoo-in. It had won like 5 Indie Ink awards. It went in with like a huge passionate following from, I think, because she serialized it originally on Wattpad. It had been reviewed by like quite a few blogs that were judges in the contest already, and they had like glowing reviews, absolutely glowing reviews. But luck of the draw assigned Obsidian to a blog that did not vibe with it. And so Obsidian was a first round cut. And then literally, I think a couple weeks later, a review for it came out on the 4 We Go blog, which was the team I'd been assigned to. Glowing reviews, top read of the year. So it just like, if the draw had shaken out a little bit differently, like I'm pretty sure Obsidian would have been at least a semi-finalist, if not
Yep.
the finalist for that team going into the finals. And then you don't know because so many of the other blogs had already read it and loved it that it's like so much comes down to that luck of the draw. It really does.
You know, you're incredibly knowledgeable and experienced in the world of publishing, and like you said, you've even audited some big 5 publishers in your past corporate life. So if you could give one piece of advice for aspiring authors, what would that be? What would you want them to know as an experienced author in the indie publishing space?
You have to know why you're publishing. You have to know why you're publishing. Like, you have to be very clear on your goals as you get into this. Because here's the thing, right? Like, readers are going to encounter your book like they encounter any other book. If you want your book to be taken seriously by readers, if you want to convince the majority of general readers that, you know, self-publishing is as valid a path as traditional publishing, self-publishing puts out books that are at the same level of quality as traditional publishing, then you need to do the work. You need to do the work. And like, if you don't or aren't in the position to do that work because you have a story to tell and you want it to exist in book form so that you can have it on your shelf, that is cool. That is cool. Like, not everybody has to do the work. But if you want the results of somebody like Ryan Cahill, right? And everybody writing self-publishing epic fantasy right now wants to be Ryan Cahill. You need to be putting in the same level of work that Ryan did. And because like luck and opportunity and all of those things are such big factors, like, you have to be okay with the fact that you can put in the work and still not get the same result. Like, it is not, there's no guarantees, there's no linear correlation, like none of that stuff. But if you accept all of that and you're okay with that and you want to do all of that, then it can be very rewarding. Like, I was just at a local event this past weekend. It was just so cool. It was like a local Ren fair. I met so many cool people. The cosplay was just fire. Like, it was just so fun. And it's very cool to go to a market stall and have your books for sale and then have people come up to you and be like, hey, I recognize you from your post on Our Fantasy and I'd like to buy your book and can you sign it? And like, it's just really, really super cool. I definitely have no regrets about leaving accounting for this. I find it way more fulfilling. And I do not for a moment regret going down the self-publishing route and not trying for traditional publishing, because so much of the control that I have when I self-publish, I just wouldn't have like under a traditional publishing model. Like, I would have to give up so many of the things that I care about in order to make it work for that kind of model. That, yeah, I don't know. For me, I just don't think the trade-off is worth it. But I 100% know other people who are going through the process right now, and for them, it makes way more sense to try querying, go agenting, and do all of those steps. At the end of the day, it just really comes down to like, what is your goal? And just be cognizant that no matter what your goal is, if you want people to read your book, just realize you're competing with TradPub, with self-pub, with people who are self-pubbing to make a business of this. And so like, the reality is, you can't, if you're not meeting the benchmark that your competition is setting, then you probably can't expect to be getting the readership that they're getting. Like, that's just kind of how it is.
From my perspective as a reader, I like it when I can tell that the author is passionate about the stories that they're creating. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes with traditional publishing, I don't feel that as much, because it feels like it's been meshed into a certain formula. Again, not always, but sometimes I can kind of pick up on that. So I agree. I think that if you can know your purpose and have passion behind your writing and the stories that you're telling, the rest kind of works itself out. Like you said, a little bit's luck, a lot of it is hard work, but yeah, I think those are great points. So I appreciate you sharing that with our aspiring authors that are here, part of the club. So before we kind of wrap things up and see what your bookmark looks like for everyone, I just wanted to give you a chance to, speak to the audience about any of the projects that you're working on or any other announcements that you kind of want to feature.
So if you are into fantasy that's a little bit different from other fantasies, you can try giving my book a shot. This is Petition by Delilah Waan. It's kind of like Jade City meets the Hunger Games, but like it's in a setting where everybody's an empath and there's a pretty ruthless job hunt tournament on with like a murder mystery thrown in. So if that sounds like your jam, then jump in. It's going to be there's going to be a special offer for you guys down in the comments. So we'll put that link in the description there. And if you want something a little bit more epic, you can go for the sequel. This is Supplicant. It's an epic fantasy heist that's kind of like Six of Crows meets Mistborn, but with a Locked Tomb twist. So if that excites you a little bit more than like post-magic school fantasy about fantasy job hunt interviews, then you can probably cut to this one. I did have beta readers who did not read the first book who jumped into this one and they were fine. So if you're not the kind of reader who has to read everything in one, you can skip to the second one and see if you like it.
No, I will not advocate for that on this channel. That's outrageous. Skipping the first book, that's insanity. I will not stand for that. Let's see what we've managed to come up with. So you saw her show her cover for Supplicant. So that's the bookmark that I went with on this one. So we'll see. It's obviously not as good as the cover, but I tried watercolor and it was a little bit more challenging than I anticipated. So
here's my one.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I did this in the style of my illustrations for the bilingual picture books, and you can see how tonally the stick figure just does not really mesh.
It does. It's adorable. I love it. If you have not had a chance to see my review of Petition, you should go check that out. Also, I'll add, like she said, the link to her page in the description. Also, she does have a YouTube channel where she kind of has great writing advice and goes a lot deeper on a lot of these topics. So if you thought that her insights were great here, you should go follow her on YouTube and get access to all of the great topics and information that she puts out over there. Believe it or not, she was actually doing a live right before we had this interview. So you get a little taste of her just incredible work ethic and her passion for what she does. So really appreciate it. So Delilah, thank you so much for having a conversation with me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of BookmarkIt. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, don't forget to join the Indie Fantasy Club to learn more about the rising stars of the self-publishing arena. But that's it for now, so we will catch you in the next episode.